Today I'm going to share with you my technique for making these burp cloths. They're personalized and I make them out of the prefold diapers that you can get. They're cloth diapers and it's a really easy, really pretty gift that you can make for somebody. I like to make them usually right before I'm about to walk out the door to a baby shower. So let's get started. So your supplies for this project will include your 6-ply cloth diapers. I like this kind from Toys R Us, Babies R Us. It's their store brand, but you can use whatever brand you like. I do recommend pre-washing it. As you can see, the top one here is pre-washed, the bottom one is not, and it's a pretty significant difference in shrinkage from pre-washing. And then I also like to pre-wash my border fabric. I also use double fold bias tape. I got this one from ShopBethanyLane on Etsy, but you can use whatever brand you like. And then you'll want to print out the pattern that you're going to embroider. For this tutorial, I'm not going to give you any measurements. The reason is, depending on the brand of diaper you use, the sizes will be slightly different, and really it's up to you to decide how big of an embroidery pattern you want versus the border. Some people might want to use a larger pattern and a smaller border, and other people might want a bigger border. So that part is really entirely up to you. What I do is I decide based on the fabric. In this case, I want to make sure I get a full flamingo in there, how big of a border I'd like, and then I find the center point going this direction after I folded it in half. And then I mark my center point, and I like to float my diapers. You can do whatever you like. I'll go ahead and float it, in this case on tearaway, but a lot of people like to use the water-soluble stabilizer. Again, that's really entirely up to you how you like to embroider. So I'd use these reinforcements from the dollar store. I find them a really easy way to mark my pattern and then match it up on my hoop, and that's what I'll do next. I'll get this embroidered up and we'll continue with the sewing part. Okay, once you've got your design embroidered on the diaper, I went ahead and used some water-soluble stabilizer on top of it. Go ahead and pull that off. If you used a basting stitch like I did, you can hit it with an iron, and that'll close up. If it's an iron that has a little bit of water in it, the steam will help close up those holes, so you won't really even see them. So once you've done that, we'll go ahead and cut our fabric. So I'm going to go a little bit wider than the area that I'm covering. And I want to make sure, since this is directional fabric, I want to make sure I get an entire flamingo on there. So I'm going to fussy cut it to a certain extent. And again, this does not have to be exact at all. Okay, so once you've got the fabric cut, the next step will be to take some double fold bias tape, and you'll want to put that over the edge of your fabric. So I cut it just to about the same size, maybe it's a little bit wider, as this piece of fabric that I cut. And I'm just gonna, about starting from the middle, I'm just gonna pin it in a couple of places just to make sure it's going all the way across the top of this fabric. And this will mean that I'm not gonna have to worry about finishing off the edge of this fabric, because this bias tape will do that for me. All right, so the next step will be to we'll put this underneath our diaper. So I'm wanting to make sure I've got an alignment about with that center flamingo and keeping that pretty straight. And remember that your diaper is not 100% straight, so sometimes you just have to eyeball this. Again, this is not about perfection. So I've got that lined up, and right now this is the right side of the fabric that you're using as the border to the right side, to the back side of your diaper. So I know that sounds like a really strange thing to do, but you'll see why we're doing that in a minute. And then I'm just going to tack it in a couple places with some pins just to hold it. Okay, and then we're going to end up sewing it all the way around here. So from here to here and then up to here. And again, I know this may look a little strange. You're going to sew as close to the edge. So I actually even move my needle over so I can get as close to the edge as possible as I'm doing this. So you'll want to make sure it's nice and taut as you're sewing. That this fabric on the back is nice and taut. Pin it in as many places as you feel like you need to be comfortable. And again, if you're using a directional fabric, make sure it's facing the right way as you're sewing it, as you're pinning it and as you're sewing it. And also just make sure that your bias tape really just needs to be over that fabric on both edges. So right here, I'm just going to pin it in place just to make sure it stays. And I'm going to give it another pin on the other side as well, just to make sure it stays in the right place. And now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. And again, you're going to sew it all the way around this edge as tightly as you can to the very edge of that fabric. Okay, so I've got it on the sewing machine, and as you can see, I've got, my needle is kind of moved over. I think maybe you can see that. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the needle. And I am going to tack it down, and then I'm going to sew all the way to this corner. I'll kind of pull it straight. You're not going to see this little crease here, so I'm not really worried about that. A lot of times this stuff will shrink up and then it won't quite be able to iron 100% flat, but again, this is all going to be hidden. So I'm going to go ahead and start sewing. It's a little hard to do one-handed, but I'll do my best for a little bit. Keep that nice and straight and as close to the edge as possible. And I'm going to put the camera down so I can turn the corner. Okay, so now I've got it sewn around 3 sides. I'm going to go ahead and take out all my pins. And then I'm going to cut off the excess fabric. So as you can see, I've got this, got a couple of pins over here. I'm going to go ahead and trim off this excess fabric on the sides, get it pretty close to get rid of any bulk. Okay. And then the next step will be to take a pair of scissors, and you'll have your corners, and of course I can't find my good scissors, but you'll have your corners there. You can just trim off that little corner piece. Don't cut your stitching, just get really close to it. You just want to get rid of that little bit of bulk right there in the corner. Okay. Okay, so after you've cut off your corners, you'll take this and you can flip it. Grab those little corners and you can push them out. You can get something like chopsticks if you need to make sure it's nice and smooth. Then pull that straight. You're going to want to press this. And then we'll take this back to the sewing machine after you've pressed it. And make sure that this is all the way. You can repin it again in a couple of spots to make sure that this is tacked under the bias tape. But you'll sew that down and you will have a nice clean finish and a nice border on your diaper. Okay, so once you've top stitched all the way across, your project is done. I usually just fold them into thirds and present them that way. Once you're done with this project, you're ready to go head out the door to that baby shower. Now that you know, get stitching.